Welcome to another episode of Mike's Money Picks. Today on the podcast, we are going to break down the Tuesday, December 5th slate of college basketball DFS. It has been a big time weekend of sports, really from, I guess, since the start of Thanksgiving. It's been just an onslaught of good sports on television and good sports to play DFS for. But, we had a big time weekend of college football. Took a little bit of a long weekend off of the podcast, and now we are back talking about the Tuesday college basketball slate, and we have some good ones. I know the rest of the world wants to talk college football right now, and I mean, I kind of do too as a Texas fan. But we do have a big time slate of college basketball coming your way tonight, and then a big time slate of college basketball coming Wednesday night, as well as we've got the Jimmy V Classic, we've got the Big East Big 12 battle. There's just going to be a lot of good college basketball in this week, and so it's going to be nice to sit down and watch these games. But not only that, but also play some DFS form on DraftKings and Fanduel, see if we can put together some winning lineups for these slates. So, if you're thinking about a schedule for the rest of the week, there's not going to be a college football episode this week, with it just being the Army-Navy showdown for DFS. We will be back for bowl season for college football, so make sure you subscribe to the channel. That way you'll be notified when all those episodes drop when bowl season gets here. But other than that, we're going to be covering college basketball Wednesday night, and then I'm going to kind of take a look and see what the slates look like Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. But, we're definitely going to be covering the big-time college basketball slates here on Mike's Money Picks. So if you play college basketball at DFS, you bet on college basketball, make sure you hit that subscribe button, make sure you hit the like button as well to help the videos get noticed, and you'll be notified when all those new episodes drop, and you'll be able to watch or listen to those as soon as they arrive. So we've got a nice little 8-game slate here on Tuesday night, so we're going to go game by game, and we're going to break down my favorite plays from each game and my favorite ways to attack each game from a DFS perspective. So let's go ahead and kick things off with the first game of the night, Florida Atlantic taking on Illinois. All right, so the first game of the night is going to be the first game of the Jimmy V Classic, FAU taking on Illinois in Madison Square Garden in New York City. Now, I say this as somebody who loves college basketball and loves playing college basketball DFS, and just a general fan of the sport. Like, I love college basketball. Injuries reporting is going to be kind of one of the biggest barriers in growing college basketball DFS. It's really knowing that, we have a lot of guys on this slate with questionable tags. And, it's kind of really hard to project what's going to happen with a lot of these guys, whether they're going to play or not play, who's going to play in their place, who's not. It just kind of creates a headache. But I'm going to do my best here on this episode to kind of evaluate what's going to happen with a lot of these guys and what are the, if-then scenarios if these guys are in or out of the lineup. So, FAU Illinois is going to be one of the best games of the night, just from a pure college basketball standpoint. It is projected to be FAU 75 to 74, according to KenPom. Both of these teams are in the top 60 in the nation in efficiency on both sides of the basketball, and they are both above average in tempo. So this is going to be just a high quality basketball game. Now, on the FAU side of things, Nick Boyd is one of those guys with a Q tag next to him, and I would tend to think that he's not going to play. His injury has been described as upper leg, and it doesn't really seem like he's all that close to coming back. Now, in his absence, what you have seen boosted minutes from Jalen Gaffney, Brian Greenlee, and Brandon Weatherspoon. And they've kind of been a mixed bag with the results. They've been fairly safe plays because they played a lot of minutes. They've all, been playing roles in the games. But in terms of value, they've all been priced up a little bit. And it's going to be kind of hard for, these guys to reach value. In the 5 games that Nick Boyd has missed, Jalen Gaffney has hit 4 times value in 3 of those 5 games. And then Brian Greenlee has also reached 4 times value in 3 of those 5 games. So I would tend to prefer those 2 guys over Brandon Weatherspoon, who has only done it in 2 of the last 5 games. Now, outside of those 3, Elijah Martin and John L. Davis are going to continue to kind of be the guys that run this team. They were their 2 best players last year. They're their 2 best players this year. And they're both they're going to have a wide range of outcomes. There's going to be games where John L. Davis goes off and, has like a 50 fantasy point night. There's going to be games where Elijah Martin goes off and has like a 50 fantasy point night. It's not really an easy situation to predict. I think if I wanted to play these guys, I would probably only play one of them because Davis's ceiling games seem to come when Martin doesn't play well. Martin's ceiling games seem to come when Davis doesn't play all that well. So if you're looking to attack this game, I would definitely get one of those 2 guys. Who's to say which one? I don't really know, if I'm being honest, but I think they're both in play. I think they're both playable. Now, the last thing is with their center position, Florida Atlantic plays pretty much four guards the entire game, and they play one guy at center between Vlad Goldine and Giancarlo Rosado. And so both these guys are going to split minutes at the center position. It's about a 60-40 split in favor of Goldine. But with Goldine, though, he can be prone to foul trouble. And if he does, and Rosado ends up getting more minutes, Rosado could be a very valuable piece in fantasy because Rosado averages well over a fantasy point per minute. In fact, he almost had 2 fantasy points per minute in the last game they played against College of Charleston. So I think Rosado is a really sneaky little upside play if we do happen to get foul trouble from Vlad Goldine. Now, for Illinois, I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on them because their rotations and their usage have been just all over the place so far this season. It's really hard to predict. It's really hard to play guys for this team. The only good news is they have 4 guys that get dual eligibility at guard and forward on DraftKings, which is just strange. I don't think I've ever seen that before. And some of these guys should not have dual eligibility. Like Quincy Guerrier is a forward, Ty Rogers is a guard. But what do I know? Anyway, there's been 2 things with this team that are trending in the right direction, and there's been one thing with this Illinois team that is constant. One of the things that's trending in the right direction is Coleman Hawkins. So Coleman Hawkins missed, I believe it was 4 games, with an injury, and he played the last game that they played against Rutgers, played 26 minutes in that game, put up 19 fantasy points, and look, he's only $5,100. This is a guy who had multiple big-time fantasy performances last season, had a triple-double last season, and so I definitely think that he's got a lot of upside at only $5,100. And then another thing that's trending upward is the minutes for Marcus Domask. He seemed to just kind of keep playing better and better as the season goes on. Put up 27 fantasy points in their last game against Rutgers, and I could definitely see him being a big piece of this Illini team as time moves forward. The one thing that has been constant for Illinois this season is Terrence Shannon Jr. He's a good basketball player, y'all. Like, he's just good at basketball. That, like, all facets of the game, he's just good. He's a guy that you would want on your team, if I'm being honest. He's priced at $8,200 on DraftKings, and he is this team's leader in usage. He is this team's best player. In his last 4 games, he's had 37, 37, 29, and 45 fantasy points. So he's given you a high floor as well as that high ceiling with 45 fantasy points. I really like Terrence Shannon in this one. If this game ends up, shooting out and ended up being like an 80 to 78 type of game, Terrence Shannon Jr. is probably going to have 40 plus fantasy points in it. Now, second game of the night is going to be Villanova and Kansas State. And look, Villanova is one of the hardest teams in the whole college basketball landscape right now to predict because they have some really good wins like the one against North Carolina, and they have some really bad losses like the ones against Drexel and St. Joe's. And I think it's because, they take a lot of threes and they allow their opponents to take a lot of threes, and threes are kind of like the more volatile option. Threes, you can have hot shooting nights and cold shooting nights. It's kind of hard to have a cold shooting night when you're dunking the basketball. So this is a very difficult team to predict, very difficult game to predict. KenPom has it as Kansas State 72 to 71, but if I'm being honest, I don't see it being that high scoring. So for the Villanova side, I'm primarily interested in Eric Dixon. He is their starting center. He's only 6'8", but he is just kind of like a pit bull down low, and he leads the team in usage, and he gives you legitimate 50 fantasy point upside. He had that value against North Carolina, who is a team that is pretty good down low in their own right. Justin Moore is their all-around best player and most high usage guard. He hasn't really had a great last couple weeks, but it's been because of cold shooting. He's 3 for 15 on his last 15 3-point shots, which is very bad. So if the shooting comes back around for Justin Moore, he could very well give you a good night. And then TJ Bamba is a guy that is third on the team in usage. I would be fairly interested in him just because he's getting a lot of shots. He's getting a lot of looks. He's just not making them. He's shooting 32% from the field so far this season. He's hit 1 of his last 13 shots. So if the shot starts falling for either TJ Bamba or Justin Moore, those guys could easily give you a performance that pays off their price tag. All right, now we got to talk about Kansas State, who is led by Tyler Perry and playing in the House of Pain Tuesday night. Okay, that was a bad pun, but Tyler Perry is their best all-around player. He's priced at $7,600. If this is a game that ends up going back and 4th, ends up being a close game down the stretch. Tyler Perry is going to have a ton of usage. What you see with him is he tends to play his best in games where they are either trailing or in a close game. He's been their best player this season. Very safe option in Tyler Perry. Now, what is good news about the rest of the Kansas State roster is that they give very heavy minutes to the rest of their starting 5. And that is going to mean that all 5 of them are going to be in play. You've got Day Ames, already mentioned Tyler Perry. You've got Cam Carter, Arthur Kaluma, and then David Ungasan. Day Ames is last of that group in usage, but he's also last in terms of price tag. He's only $4,400 on DraftKings. And I think he's in play just because he's going to be out on the floor quite a lot. And if he does happen to give you, like a double-digit scoring night, he's going to be a pretty solid play. David Ungasan is 4th out of the starting lineup in usage, but he's their best rebounder. Against this Villanova team, he's going to be needed to get a lot of rebounds. So definitely don't think he's a bad play. I think he's a little overpriced on DraftKings, if I'm being honest. I would rather play Arthur Kaluma, who in their last 2 games has actually taken over for the team in terms of their usage leader. He's had double-digit shots in every single game he's played so far this season. He transferred from Creighton because he wanted to be a bigger role on his team as opposed to like the 4th or 5th wheel for Creighton. And he's gotten that so far with Kansas State. So I definitely think Kaluma is another high upside play along with Perry. And Cam Carter is going to be in play for me as well. He's a guy who can really fill up the stat sheet and give you fancy scoring in a lot of different ways. So Kansas State isn't just Tyler Perry, but that whole starting 5 is going to be in play for me. Now, Providence taking on Oklahoma is another one of the Big East Big 12 battle that is taking place. This one is projected to be Oklahoma 75-70. For Providence, they've got their big 3 of Carter, Hopkins, and Aduro. More on them in a second. But Jaden Pierre, I think, is a really solid value play in this game. He is back in the lineup after returning from injury. Only played 22 minutes against Rhode Island, but that was all he needed to put up 22 fantasy points. And that is over 4 times value for his salary. Remember, we kind of want 4 times value as like a baseline because it's going to take generally about 210-ish points to cash in tournaments or win in cash games. So, to get 4 times value out of a guy $4,900, that's pretty solid. I would definitely have Jaden Pierre in my player pool on Tuesday night. Now after that, we talked about their big 3, Carter, Hopkins, and Aduro. Carter is the guy I'm going to have the most interested in. And it's because of when you look at what Providence has done this season, when they have been in close games, Carter has been at his absolute best. 10-point win against Wisconsin-Milwaukee, 37 fantasy points. 3-point loss to Kansas State, 38 fantasy points. 7-point win to Georgia, 47.75 fantasy points. Just the list goes on. When there's a close game, Carter's going to be the one that's going to have the ball in his hands. He is a great rebounding guard who can also get you a lot of assists and steals as well. I think he's a guy who can really rack up fantasy points in bunches, and he's one of my favorite pay-up options on this entire slate. Now, on the Oklahoma side of things, we got to talk about the big fella down low, Sam Godwin. He did not play their last game against Arkansas Pine Bluff, and I can't find a reason why anywhere. I've really searched the internet for it, and I can't find out why. But what I do know is that Porter Moser has said in interviews that Sam Godwin will be back for this game. Now, what will that have an effect on? Well, in the last 2 games, John Hughley, I'm going to go with Hughley. John Hughley, the Pitt transfer, has been big time in Oklahoma's last 2 games. 25 and 33 fantasy points, 33 in only 20 minutes in that game where Sam Godwin sat out. So does Hughley end up keeping his spot in the starting lineup? I do not know, but I think Hughley has got a lot of upside if he does, in fact, end up keeping that spot. Now, for the rest of the Oklahoma roster, they're a pretty balanced team, much like Kansas State that we talked about earlier. But the problem is a lot of these guys have much different splits in Oklahoma's blowout wins versus their close games against competitive competition. So I would recommend looking at those close games and seeing how guys have done. Otega Owe has been their most consistent best player all season long, and he's had a high floor even in the close games. He hasn't had a fantasy performance under 20 fantasy points, and he's been over 25 and over half of them. So I think he's a pretty solid option. But the guy who has upped his game in the close games is their point guard, Milos Uzan. So Uzan has been the guy who has played better against better competition. He had 23 fantasy points in both the games against USC and Iowa, which are the 2 best opponents that Oklahoma has played so far. So Uzan would get the edge for me from any of the Sooners I'm going to target, but I am going to be taking some shots with John Hughley in GPP simply because I think he has a lot of upside, and I don't think the Sam Godwin coming back is going to affect him all that much. Now, next up, we have a battle in the Big Ten, which is projected to be the lowest scoring game of the night. Wisconsin taking on Michigan State. This one, according to KenPom, is projected to be 65-64 in favor of Michigan State. You got to love Big Ten basketball, folks. It's just like Big Ten football. So, on the Wisconsin side, you've got Stephen Crow, who is a legit 7-footer, who is probably, if I had to say so, Wisconsin's best all overall player for what he does. Now, he's not like a guy who's, going to be getting an ISO with 2 minutes to go, like cleared out for him type of guy, but he does a lot on the floor, and he's a legit 7-footer. He's a matchup problem. I could see him giving Michigan State big time issues. He's only 7,000, so you really only need about 28 to 30 fantasy points to get value, and he's hit that mark in both of his last 2 games. Tyler Wall and Chucky Hepburn were what I would have considered Wisconsin's 2 best players last season. And they have been riding the roller coaster so far this year. They have a wide range of outcomes. Their usage rate really fluctuates. Their shot rate really fluctuates. Their shot percentage really fluctuates. I just don't really know what to expect from either of those 2 guys. In a game where they're only projected to score 64 points, I'm kind of good on both of those. Now, if you've been listening to the podcast all season long, you've heard me talk about AJ Storr, who is a Providence transfer who is leading the team in usage, leading the team in shots, but he doesn't do a whole lot else outside of score. Well, he's kind of fallen to a price point on DraftKings at $4,800 where I'm kind of willing to play him again. Even if all he's going to do is score, he only needs 20 fantasy points to hit value. And, if he has a good shooting night, get you a few boards, that's not a very unreasonable expectation for that salary. Then Max Klesmit was kind of the hero of the Marquette game over the weekend for Wisconsin, but I kind of think that was more of a one-time flash in the pan. I would want to see it from him again before I'm willing to go back to it. Now, on the Michigan State side, Tyson Walker has a Q tag next to his name. I don't think he's going to sit out. I think he's totally okay. It's just something that Tom Izzo floated out there like, hey, he's dealing with a hip thing. Didn't give any indication that he's going to be a game time decision, didn't give any indication that he's going to be out. And if Tyson Walker plays, I think he's a guy that you got to consider for your lineups. Even though Michigan State's only projected 65 points, they don't score a whole lot to begin with usually. And this is a guy who had a legitimate 56.75 fantasy point performance earlier in the season. He does lead the team in usage, massive 29% usage rate. So I really think Tyson Walker is going to be in play for me. I'm not worried about that Q tag unless I see some kind of report before tip off that he is not out there. Now, the rest of the rotation has just been kind of juggled and messed with, and guys have gone in and out, and the roles have been increased and decreased. AJ Hoggard would be the guy that I would think would see a huge boost if Tyson Walker were to sit, but he actually kind of got demoted to the bench in their last game, so I'm not super interested in him for that reason. What you saw when he moved to the bench was a kind of a promotion for Jaden Akins. He kind of took over the team's number 2 scorer role behind Tyson Walker, and he's had double-digit shots in every game so far. So Jaden Akins, I will consider at least. And then Trey Hallman is the guy who directly started in place of AJ Hoggard, and he ended up putting up 21.5 fantasy points in 22 minutes. Look, if he continues at that same rate and gets 25 minutes against Wisconsin, gives you 25 fantasy points, that's 6 times value for a guy that's only $4,200. I think he is a very reasonable and probably very popular value play. But even in a game where, Michigan State's only projected 65 points, I don't think you have to target anybody from this game. I think there's a lot of better game environments that you can go after, and that's definitely not going to be priority to target anybody from that game, in my opinion. All right, that does it for the first 4 games. Let's go ahead and take a quick breather, and then let's talk about the last 4. All right, so before we finish up the slate, I do want to mention there are a few places where you can get more information from me. First off, you can follow me on X at Mike's Money Picks. If there's any of these injury updates that will change my opinion on players, I do try to get it out there. Now, I am a dad of a 3-month-old baby girl now, so I am a little preoccupied sometimes at night, but I do try to get it out there if there's anything that's pressing, anything that changes my mind. And then I do try to tweet out the DFS rundown for every college basketball slate where I just kind of go through some of my favorite categorical plays for each slate. Also, you can find me in the Fantasy Corner Discord. It's entirely free. The link is in the description on YouTube and on the audio feed. We've got a lot of different DFS players for a lot of different sports in there. And there's just a lot of good discussion on plays. A lot of people bouncing ideas off each other, sharing information. It's just a great environment that can help you get better at DFS. And also, it's a lot of fun to be a part of a community where you're talking about DFS and sweating it out together. And I'd highly recommend it if you're looking to get better. And then also, I do write my full articles on my Patreon, patreon.com/Mike'sMoneyPicks. I profile all my core plays for every college basketball, college football, and NFL slate, as well as just kind of give my lineup strategy and attack strategy for each slate. If you're looking to get better at DFS or looking to get more information for how to play college basketball DFS, I highly recommend it. I'm not going to sit here and guarantee that you're going to win thousands of dollars off of it because that's just not how it works. But it can give you guys some good information, give you guys some strategy to go off of that will just help you build your lineups and help you get better. And lastly, if you're looking to try something new this college basketball season, head on over to signupexpert.com/Mike'sPicks. We are partnered with SignUpExpert, and what they do is they give the best offers and promo codes for new users on any DFS player prop and sportsbook site. So head on over there, get the new promo code for a new user, and you'll just start off with instant bonuses, instant boosts on all these sites. I highly recommend it if you're looking to sign up for something new. All right, that does it for that section. So let's go ahead and jump back in with our fifth game of the night, which is going to be Georgia Tech taking on Georgia, the Queen Old-Fashioned Hate Basketball Edition. So according to Ken Palm, this one is projected to be Georgia 76-70. Now, Georgia Tech, in the early part of the season, was absolutely bullied down low. They were a team that you could just start your big against and have no worries in the world about it. Well, they've kind of changed that up in the last two games, and they've gone with a bigger lineup. And what that bigger lineup has done is it has led for less minutes and less usage for a lot of their secondary guards and more usage for their best player, which is Miles Kelly. Miles Kelly has seen a massive usage rate in the last two games. He's really seen a massive usage rate all season, and he is a guard who can fill up the stat sheet in all kinds of ways, leads the team in shots, and he's just a guy who can get it done anywhere. And with Georgia Tech being projected to score 70 points, I do like the idea of Miles Kelly at only $7,400 being a guy who can, easily hit 4 times value. Now, one of the reasons why they've gone with the big lineup has been the emergence of Baye Ndongo. So Baye Ndongo is I believe he is a freshman, but he did not start playing this season until the Cincinnati game right before Thanksgiving. And since then, he's played 3 games. He's put up at least 19.5 fantasy points in all of them, but he had a big-time showing against Duke where he put up 21 and 5 and 4 blocks, 40 total fantasy points in that game for Baye Ndongo, and I kind of think he could do it again. Like, Georgia is not really a great rebounding team. Baye Ndongo is a guy who is putting up well over a fantasy point per minute so far in this season. So Baye Ndongo is a guy who, even though he's been priced up at $7,200, I think he still possesses the upside to hit value on this slate. I mentioned Georgia's not a good rebounding team. Well, according to Ken Palm, they are outside the top 200 in both offensive and defensive rebounding. That bodes well for all Georgia Tech's rebounders to get some extra boards here in this game. I am primarily interested in those two guys on Georgia Tech just because with the lineup changes, those are the two that have gone up, whereas everybody else has kind of gone down. Kyle Sturdivant is a guard off the bench who is going to see a lot of usage, but I don't really like the price tag for him. I'd prefer him to be a little bit cheaper. On the Georgia side of things, Georgia is a very balanced team. As the season has gone on, though, you've started to kind of see the usage rates kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? I guess pan out. Like, we're starting to see some trends that are developing where we can kind of bank on them for a little bit. And what you're seeing is they're running their offense more through Silas DeMary and RJ Melendez. Noah Thomason is still going to be there. He's still going to be involved. Jabri Abdur-Rahim is still going to be there, still going to be involved. So I'm not just going to cross those two guys out. But as the season is going on, you're seeing increasing usage for Demery and Melendez. I think Demery is how you pronounce it. But anyway, Silas Demery leads them in assist rate, a very high assist rate for Silas Demery, averages, 2.5 per game, which is not bad for a freshman. And I think he's a guy that I would be willing to play. There's also missing some games from his game log on DraftKings that are actually two good performances. So I'm definitely willing to go to Demery as his usage is going in the right direction. RJ Melendez is the other guy whose usage is going in the right direction. Last two games against Florida State and Mercer, 31 and 27 fantasy points, and only $5,400 for RJ Melendez. I think he's a big time player that could definitely give you big time value. Just know that, remembering from his time in Illinois, he's going to have some dud games. He has some single digit fantasy point performances this season at Georgia, but I have faith that his usage is going to continue the way it has in each of the last three games. Now, after those two, like I said, I don't think you can just cross out Thomason and Abdur-Rahim, but they're projected to score 76 points. There's definitely some pieces on this Georgia team that you can go with. That is one of the higher totals on the slate tonight. Next up, we do have UNC versus UConn in what is arguably the game of the night. I would rank this one slightly ahead of FAU at Illinois, only slightly though. This one is projected to be UConn 80 to 76, according to KenPom. And look, UConn is the team of unpredictability in this one. Stephon Castle, their likely lottery pick, freshman guard, is back in action after missing a few games, which is going to throw a wrench into things. Specifically, Tristan Newton's usage, I would expect to come back down to earth a little bit. But you've also got Donovan Clingan, Cam Spencer, and Alex Caravan, who are all game time decisions and would all significantly impact this UConn rotation. Now, Clingan is like the big one because Clingan is just going to definitely impact the strategy on both sides if he's in or if he's out. You got Armando Bacot on the other side for UNC, and those are two of the best big men in college basketball going head to head. I could see them both doing really well against each other. I could see them both struggling against each other. I could see one of them doing well and the other getting in foul trouble. Like, I could see all those scenarios playing out with these two guys going up against each other. But I think he's an incredibly high ceiling play if he is active, and you got to consider him if he is active. But if he's not active, then we're going to look at Samson Johnson, who has been Clingan's backup. And when Clingan gets in foul trouble, Samson Johnson tends to have pretty big performances. Just look at the Texas game where Clingan spent the entire game in foul trouble. Samson Johnson put up 31 fantasy points. So if Clingan is out, I think Samson Johnson becomes an easy play. The downside is with this game starting at 8:45, you're not going to have a whole lot of late swap options if you're planning on these guys being in or out either way. So hopefully we get news sometime Tuesday as to the status of these guys. Now, if Caravan and Spencer are out, Caravan really is the only guy that kind of plays the four for them, and he's a little bit of a stretch four for UConn. So I think that one leaves him a little more question marks. If UConn has to go small, I would see that being more minutes for Hassan Diarra and Solomon Ball. And then if they want to just try to play a pure power forward, Jalen Stewart would probably be the guy that would end up getting a lot more minutes, but I don't really trust that one a whole lot. Now, if Cam Spencer is out, I think that one's pretty simple. It's just going to be more minutes and more usage for Stephon Castle. And so for a guy in Castle that's only $7,200 on DraftKings, he has 140 fantasy point performance and 124 fantasy point performance. Now, granted, he hasn't played a game against any team of any kind of caliber competition, but I just think that he's got a lot of upside as a guy who's going to be a lottery pick and could see big-time usage if Cam Spencer is, in fact, out. Now, on the North Carolina side of things, we all know about Armando Bacot. And if UConn has to go small with no Clingan and no Caravan, Bacot and Harrison Ingram have a chance to really eat down low, in my opinion. But again, it's going to be hard to determine that if we don't know the injury news on those guys till later in the day. Now, RJ Davis has been really heating up lately. He's been outstanding in his last four games, having over 33.75 fantasy points in all of them, which would be about 4 times value in all of them, 42.75 in his last game against FSU. And so I definitely think that RJ Davis could be in for a big time performance against this UConn backcourt. And then Elliot Kadu is the other guy that I want to talk about. He's been inserted into the starting lineup for the last 3 games. And in those 3 games, he's averaging about 18 fantasy points per game. It's not like super earth-shattering numbers, but he is a guy that he's only $5,100. This is one of the highest game totals of the night. North Carolina projected to score 76 points. Maybe Kadu is out there on the floor for a while, gives you maybe an 8-point 10 assists type of game. Maybe not 10 assists, but maybe he's able to give you something like that, give you good value. Now, the next game of the night is going to be Seton Hall taking on Baylor. This one is interesting because Seton Hall, they have their guys priced up like a lot for no reason. But anyway, let's go ahead and do the rundown. So this one is projected to be Baylor 84-72, which makes Baylor the highest team on the slate according to KenPom. They're the team on the slate projected with the most points, I should say, according to KenPom. I should have been more specific there. Now, for Seton Hall, Kadari Richmond has a massive 27% usage rate, but like he's priced up so high, like I don't really want to use him, even though I know he's going to get all that usage. He's only hit 4 times value in 2 of the last 5 games. And that's just not exactly like a great number. So I'm kind of out on Kadari Richmond, even though he is the guy that if Seton Hall is able to keep this close or maybe win this game, it's probably going to be because he has a big game, but that's just a lot of price tag to pay, in my opinion. I would rather play Dre Davis, who is a guy who can fill up the stat sheet in a lot of different ways. He has hit 4 times value in 3 of his last 4. He's got dual eligibility at guard and forward. That would be the Seton Hall guy that I would rather play. Other than that, I think you've got a lot of guys who are arguably overpriced for what their role is on the team and what else they do. With Kadari Richmond being like a big time usage leader, I just really think that 4 other guys over $6,000 isn't exactly feasible to pay up for a lot of them. Now, on the Baylor side of things, Ray J. Dennis, the Toledo transfer, Ray J. Dennis, now leads the team in usage, and he has a big-time 39% assist rate, averaging 6.5 assists per game. If Baylor gets to 84 points, which KenPom is projecting them to, Ray J. Dennis is a guy that is going to have a pretty big night because it means he's going to be dishing out a lot of assists. And so I think if you're playing any kind of exposure to Baylor, I would probably be putting Dennis in that. Maybe playing Dennis and 1 or 2 other guys from this Bears team, and just hoping that they do get to 84 or maybe even 90 points, and it's because he keeps racking up the assists. Now, the other guards for Baylor, you've got Jacoby Walter, who's another guy that I mentioned, kind of like Stephon Castle, that's going to be a lottery pick in the NBA draft. Very talented. He is a pure scorer, as is Jaden Nunn. I think both those guys kind of cancel each other out. Walter has been the more productive player to this point in the season, but not that much more that I think he needs to be $1,800 more expensive than Jaden Nunn. But what I mean to say with these two guys is these are the 2 primary scoring guards. And if I'm playing these like even multiple Baylor Bears, I'm not going to play more than one of those 2. I would play Dennis and Walter, Dennis and Nunn. I would not play Walter and Nunn together because they're kind of going to cancel each other out. Now, a guy that you can play with either of them is going to be Ives Messi, who is their best big man, and he needs to play more minutes. I don't know why he is only playing 12, and 19 minutes in their last 3 games, but that's beside the point. He averaged about 1.3 fantasy points per minute. He's a big-time rebounder, big-time shot blocker. I just think he's good, and he's only $6,600 at a team with Seton Hall that historically has not done well against big men. I really do like Ives Messi in this game at $6,600. And if you're looking for any other guy on Baylor that could maybe come alive off the bench, Langston Love would probably be that guy. He's shown a legitimate ceiling this year with 2 fantasy points or 2 games over 27 fantasy points at a salary of only $4,900. That would be pretty doggone good. And I think he's a piece that you can play if you just want to get more pieces of Baylor. Now, the last game of the night is Indiana taking on Michigan. And this one is projected to be Michigan 77-71. That's a pretty solid total for these 2 teams, in my opinion. And Michigan, I think, is very attackable. Michigan gives up a lot of offensive rebounds, which could be a big-time performance for Kel Ware, the Oregon transfer. He's a legit 7-footer. He's going to give Michigan problems. He's had double-digit shot attempts in each of his last 5 games, and he's averaged about 10 rebounds a game in his last 5 games. He also gives you some shot blocking upside as well. In his last 2 games, 40.5 and 52 fantasy points. Kel Ware, really, really solid play. One of my favorite pay-up options on the slate. Now, after that, Xavier Johnson, Indiana's starting point guard, he's got a Q tag next to his name, but I would tend to think that he's going to miss this game. And so I would plan for that. And in the last game where he was out, Trey Galloway had a big time role. Taking on Maryland, Trey Galloway played 34 minutes, 29.5 fantasy points. I'm not saying he's going to repeat that again, but he doesn't need to at $5,600. And Indiana's projected for 77 points in this game. 71 points in this game. So like the stat lines that I mentioned for Ware and Galloway, Galloway. We're putting up 40 fantasy points, Galloway putting up 29 fantasy points. Those were in the Maryland game where they only put up 65 total points. So if they get you to 71 or maybe even more, then that gives these guys a lot of upside. Mackenzie Mbako is another guy who I think has a lot of upside and played a big role without Xavier Johnson. In his last 2 games, he's had 29 and 28.75 fantasy points, only $5,200. That's a lot of upside for a guy at only $5,200. Now, Gabe Cupps is a guy who got big-time boosted minutes because of Xavier Johnson being out. But in the Maryland game, he played 24 minutes, took 2 shots, missed both of them, 4.25 fantasy points. He is a big-time member of the cardio club. He is in the game, but he is basically just running up and down the floor, standing in the corner, and if it gets passed to him, he can take a shot. But $3,700, he doesn't need to do much to give you value, but he hasn't shown me a whole lot over the last 2 games of playing 20-plus minutes that he is going to do a whole lot to give you value. I just wanted to mention it because he is a guy who's going to be out there quite a lot, and there's a chance that he could score 10 to 15 fantasy points. Now, on the Michigan side of things, they're a very concentrated team. Doug McDaniel and Olivia Nkamwa combined for over a 50% shot rate, meaning when the 2 of those guys are on the floor, they're taking over half of the shots that Michigan takes, which is just an insane number for 2 guys. But anyway, McDaniel, I really like. I think he's a solid matchup for Indiana in terms of just a guy who can attack this game from the guard position. He's basically guaranteed to get you 12 shots. He's gotten 12 shots in every game so far this season. He's also shown some upside with multiple fantasy point performances over 40. I really like Doug McDaniel in this game. However, I see it being a little bit tougher for Olivier Nkamwa. He does a lot of his work on the inside where you've got a battle with Malik Renew and Kellel Ware. I just don't think it's the best spot for Nkamwa, even though, like I said, he's got such a high shot rate. He's going to give you plenty of opportunities to put up fantasy points. I just don't know how efficient he's going to be. And so if I think it's going to be tough for Nkamwa, I also think it's going to be tough for their center, Terrace Reed Jr. down low. I would just probably stay away from those 2 guys, as they're going up against Kellel Ware and Malik Renew down low. A guy that I do need to mention is Jalen Llewellyn. I hope I'm saying that last name right, Llewellyn. It looks like Llewellyn. Anyway, he was a big-time freshman recruit a year ago, tore his ACL. He's back now. He played 10 minutes against Oregon, only put up 4.5 fantasy points. But who's to say he's not going to come back this game and be fully back and play 20 minutes and put up 25 fantasy points? I don't know. I think it's a possibility. He's only $4,200. I think if you're playing some GPPs, I think he's worth just a little bit of a shot at, just because what if he does come back and, he is the big-time recruit that we thought he was going to be. But I totally understand if you're sitting there thinking that you would like to see more before you put him into your lineups, because only playing 10 minutes is not exactly, a ringing sign of endorsement from the coaching staff. So we'll see how that one goes, but that is definitely something you're going to monitor going forward with these Michigan Wolverines. All right, that does it for the last 4 games, and that does it for this episode. So hopefully we're able to give you guys plenty of information about all the 8 games on this slate. They're going to help you make the right picks and help you win some money in DFS on Tuesday night. If you like what you saw in the video, please hit the like button. It helps me out, helps the videos get noticed. If you're listening to the podcast, rate and review. Again, it helps me out a lot to get those ratings and reviews. It helps the podcast get noticed, bumps up on all the charts, and I really do appreciate it. And again, if you want to find more from me, you got Twitter. Actually, I should be calling it X because I don't know if it's ever going back to Twitter. At Mike's Money Picks on X. Link to the Fantasy Corner Discord is in the description. Link to the Patreon is in the description as well if you want those. And signupexpert.com/Mike's Picks if you want to try something new. All right, so we will be back for the Wednesday college basketball slate because, hey, I get to talk about my Texas Longhorns on Wednesday. They've got a little bit of a revenge game going on. So I will be back to talk about that. So make sure you hit that subscribe button. You'll be notified when the new episodes drop, like that episode coming tomorrow, and like the rest of our college basketball content through the rest of the season, college football content through bowl season, and NFL content all the way up until the Super Bowl. So if you made it this far, hopefully you like what you saw or heard. Hopefully I'm able to help you guys win some money. Thank you guys for watching and listening, and I will see you next time.